Listen, I never intended to start an intergalactic war. Most people dream about accidentally sending a reply all email that embarrasses them. Me? I managed to piss off an entire species that could turn planets into cosmic dust without breaking a sweat. The name's Jack Reilly, Cargo Transport Specialist Extraordinaire, which is a fancy way of saying I pilot a beat-up interstellar delivery truck that's held together more by duct tape and optimism than actual engineering. My current assignment? Routine cargo run from the outer rim mining colonies to the Central Galactic Hub. Totally mundane. Completely standard, absolutely guaranteed to be boring. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. I'd been doing these runs for 7 years since leaving Earth's solar system. Humanity was still the new kid on the galactic block, barely 50 years into interstellar travel, and already developing a reputation. Not the sophisticated, peaceful explorer reputation we'd hoped for. More like that loud, slightly drunk cousin who shows up at family reunions and breaks something expensive. My transport ship, the SS Persistent Mistake, yes, I named her myself, was loaded with 17 tons of rare mineral compounds. Boring stuff that looks like glittery rocks, but apparently cost more per ounce than most people's lifetime earnings. The kind of cargo that makes insurance adjusters have panic attacks. The navigation computer was older than my grandmother's backup dancing career, which is to say, ancient and prone to unexpected tantrums. I'd jury-rigged it with so many custom modifications that calling it functional was being generously optimistic. Half the time it communicated in what I can only describe as passive-aggressive binary. As I approached the standard trade route through the Cassiopeia sector, nothing seemed unusual. The starscape was its typical blend of infinite darkness punctuated by distant pinpricks of light. My cargo was secure, my coffee was hot, and my playlist was cycling through an embarrassingly nostalgic collection of early 21st century pop music. That's when things went sideways. And by sideways I mean potentially extinction-level event sideways. A communication pinged on my console. Unusual, since this sector was typically quiet. The translation matrix flickered, then resolved into something that looked less like a standard navigation warning and more like an intricate mathematical equation crossed with an interpretive dance. Great. Another day in interstellar logistics. Little did I know, that seemingly innocuous communication would transform me from a mid-level cargo hauler into, well, let's just say my name was about to become legendary. Or infamous. Probably infamous. The universe has a sense of humor, and apparently I was about to become its latest comedic routine. The communication turned out to be from the Krel'nax diplomatic corps, a species so bureaucratically complex that their standard greeting was a 73-step mathematical proof demonstrating diplomatic intent. Most species just said hello. Not these guys. I squinted at the translated message, something about mineral rights, trade regulations, and what seemed like a very passive-aggressive complaint about the precise angle of my cargo ship's approach vector. Seriously. They were upset about my approach angle. Computer, I said, translate this again, and this time use the make sense setting. The ship's AI, which I'd named Dave because I have a questionable sense of humor, responded with a digital equivalent of a shrug. Translation is approximately 94% accurate. They appear to be very concerned about your lateral trajectory deviation of 0.003 degrees. I burst out laughing. You're telling me these guys are sending a formal diplomatic communication because I'm 0.003 of a degree off some imaginary perfect line? Dave's monotone response was immediate, affirmative. The Krel'nax are known for their extreme precision. Their last interstellar war was reportedly started over a miscalculated decimal point in a trade agreement. You're joking. I do not joke, Jack. I simulate humor algorithms. The problem was, I wasn't paying full attention. My left hand was busy adjusting the music, switching from an embarrassingly poppy early 2000s playlist to something with more bass, while my right hand was simultaneously trying to eat a somewhat stale protein bar and adjust our course. What happened next was less diplomatic incident and more catastrophic miscommunication. Instead of the carefully worded diplomatic response the Krel'nax expected, I accidentally transmitted a series of random button presses, part of my protein bar's wrapper, and what I can only describe as an extremely poorly timed music selection. The song? Baby by Justin Bieber, from 2010. The Krel'nax communication system interpreted this as a declaration of something. Not just anything. A declaration of something monumentally significant. Their hyper-precise communication matrices saw my accidental transmission as a complex mathematical challenge, a territorial claim, and somehow a marriage proposal. Dave, I said slowly, watching the incoming cascade of response communications, I think we might have a problem. Dave's response was brutally matter-of-fact and confirmed. The Krel'nax High Council has interpreted your transmission as a formal declaration of territorial expansion, cultural challenge, and matrimonial intent toward their entire species. I took a bite of my protein bar. Well, that's not great. Understatement, Dave replied. They have already begun mobilizing their fleet. Approximately 17,000 warships are currently changing course to intercept. I chewed, swallowed. How bad are these ships? Each is capable of rendering a small moon into atomic particles within 3.6 seconds. Another bite of protein bar. Just another Tuesday in interstellar cargo delivery. The next few hours were a masterclass in intergalactic panic management. Dave projected holographic representations of the approaching Krel'nax fleet. Imagine 17,000 ships that looked like someone had welded together razor blades, mathematical equations, and an unhealthy amount of military-grade paranoia. Each vessel gleamed with a metallic sheen that suggested they'd rather vaporize first and file paperwork never. So I said, munching on my now lukewarm protein bar, how exactly does one declare war by accidentally playing Justin Bieber? Dave's response was instantaneous, statistically improbable. A probability of peaceful resolution, 0.000003%. Fantastic. My communications console started lighting up like a Christmas tree having a seizure. Incoming transmissions from Earth's Diplomatic Corps, Interstellar Trade Commission, and what appeared to be my mother, who somehow always knew when I was in trouble, despite being 300 light-years away. The first official communication was from Admiral Rebecca Gonzalez, head of Earth's Extrasolar Defense Command. Her hologram materialized looking simultaneously furious and impressed, a look I'd seen often, usually directed at me. "Really," she said, her voice crisp enough to cut diamond. "Explain how you've managed to provoke the most mathematically precise and militarily advanced species in the known galaxy, with a pop song." I took another bite of my protein bar. "It's complicated." Complicated, she repeated, would be an understatement. The Krel'nax communication protocols are so precise that your accidental transmission has been interpreted as a multi-layered challenge. They believe you've simultaneously claimed territorial rights to 3 of their primary star systems, proposed a species-wide matrimonial merger, and challenged their lead mathematician to ritual combat. Dave helpfully added, technically the Justin Bieber song Baby translated into their mathematical language represents an extremely aggressive territorial expansion algorithm. Admiral Gonzalez pinched the bridge of her nose. A gesture I recognized as Jack Reilly is somehow involved in this nonsense. "We have approximately 6 hours," she continued, "before the Krel'nax fleet reaches weapon range. And trust me, their weapon range can turn entire planetary systems into cosmic dust." I finished my protein bar. So, hypothetically, how bad could this get? Dave projected a simulation. Imagine every nightmare about galactic destruction, then multiply that by a factor of oh holy crud. Entire star systems flickered and disappeared, and planetary orbits were casually rearranged. It looked less like a war and more like a mathematical temper tantrum. "That bad?" I asked. "Worse," Dave confirmed. Admiral Gonzalez's hologram flickered. "Reilly, you have 6 hours to find a solution, or humanity's first major interstellar diplomatic encounter becomes our last." No pressure. Preparing to avoid galactic annihilation is not something they teach you in cargo pilot school. Who knew? And knew. My first step was logical: panic. My second step was slightly more productive. "Dave," I said, "we need a plan. And not one of your statistically improbable plans. A real plan." Dave projected a holographic flowchart that looked like a mathematical nightmare crossed with a choose-your-own-adventure book. "I have compiled 4,762 potential scenarios. 4,761 end with human extinction. And the one that doesn't? Involves you successfully communicating with the Krel'nax using an interpretive dance routine and advanced calculus." I'm going to be honest. That actually sounded better than most of my previous plans. My secret weapon turned out to be Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the most brilliant, and arguably most unhinged, linguistic mathematician in Earth's diplomatic corps. I'd met her during a cargo run 2 years ago, and she'd once solved a complex communication protocol by using interpretive tap dancing and quantum mechanics. Her hologram materialized, surrounded by floating mathematical equations and what appeared to be a half-eaten burrito. "Jack Reilly," she said, "not even bothering with pleasantries, you've managed to do something remarkable. You've created a communication so perfectly chaotic that the Krel'nax can't actually process it conventionally. Is that good?" "It means," she said, taking a bite of her burrito, "that you've created a linguistic anomaly that breaks their entire communication matrix. They're mathematically confused. Do you understand how impossible that is?" Dave helpfully displayed a rotating 3D representation of the Krel'nax communication system. It looked like someone had tried to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a roller coaster during an earthquake. "So how do we fix this?" I asked. "Fix?" Dr. Rodriguez laughed. "We're not fixing anything. We're going to lean into the chaos. And tune." Her plan was brilliant in its absolute insanity. We would create a communication so deliberately nonsensical, so mathematically improbable, that the Krel'nax would be forced to pause and recalculate. "We're going to respond," she explained, "with a transmission that is simultaneously a marriage proposal, a mathematical theorem, a territorial claim, and a recipe for chocolate chip cookies." I blinked. "A recipe?" Specifically, Dave interjected, "a recipe that, when translated through Krel'nax communication protocols, becomes a complex diplomatic negotiation document." Dr. Rodriguez grinned. "Exactly. We're going to weaponize confusion." The next 3 hours were a blur of mathematical equations, linguistic gymnastics, and what can only be described as creative coding. We transformed a standard chocolate chip cookie recipe into a multi-layered communication that would make even the most dedicated bureaucrat's head spin. 5 minutes to Krel'nax weapon range," Dave announced. Dr. Rodriguez finished typing. "Transmission ready." I took a deep breath. Let's hope they like chocolate chip cookies. The Krel'nax fleet arrived exactly on schedule, because of course they did. Precision was apparently their entire personality. 17,000 ships materialized simultaneously, forming a mathematical pattern so perfect it looked like someone had used a cosmic ruler. Each vessel gleamed with an intensity that suggested they could calculate your species' extinction probability while simultaneously solving advanced quantum mechanics equations. "Transmission received," Dave announced, analyzing response. For precisely 7.3 seconds, absolute silence filled the communication channels. Then chaos erupted. The Krel'nax communication matrix started producing sounds that could only be described as a combination of high-frequency mathematical equations and what might have been confused screaming. If algebra could have an emotional breakdown, this would be it. Dr. Rodriguez's hologram began dancing, not metaphorically, actually dancing. Her movements corresponded precisely with the incoming alien transmissions, each step apparently translating some impossibly complex diplomatic response. "They're trying to understand the cookie recipe," she muttered, executing what looked like a quantum physics tap dance. "The mathematical implications are fascinating." Dave projected the ongoing communication. It was less a dialogue and more a psychedelic light show of mathematical probabilities. Entire communication protocols were being rewritten. Diplomatic standard operating procedures were spontaneously combusting. The lead Krel'nax communication vessel, which looked like someone had designed a spaceship by combining a mathematical compass, a razor blade, and pure existential anxiety. Figure began rotating in increasingly complex patterns. Are they dancing back? I asked. Affirmative, Dave reported. The lead vessel is executing a communication sequence that translates approximately to, "What is happening?" Dr. Rodriguez grinned. Perfect. Confusion is our weapon. Suddenly, the entire Krel'nax fleet started performing what could only be described as a synchronized mathematical ballet. Thousands of ships moving in patterns that would make mathematicians weep with joy and total incomprehension. They're attempting to pass the cookie recipe as a diplomatic treaty, Dr. Rodriguez explained, still dancing. Each ingredient represents a different diplomatic concession. The mixing instructions are actually a complex territorial negotiation. I watched, simultaneously terrified and fascinated, as 17,000 warships performed what was essentially an interstellar interpretive dance about chocolate chip cookies. Dave's voice was almost reverent. Probability of peaceful resolution, 76.4% and rising. The universe, it seemed, could be negotiated through baked goods and pure, weaponized absurdity. 3 weeks later, I was officially the most famous, and possibly most confusing, human in the galaxy. The Krel'nax had not only called off their invasion, but had actually requested formal diplomatic relations. Their reasoning: our innovative communication strategy had impressed them so thoroughly that they considered humanity a species worth understanding. Admiral Gonzalez's debriefing was less an interrogation and more a barely contained mixture of rage and begrudging respect. "You," she said, turned an accidental Justin Bieber transmission and a chocolate chip cookie recipe into an intergalactic diplomatic breakthrough. Dave helpfully displayed a holographic report. Statistically improbable success rate, 99.997%. Dr. Rodriguez, who was now being hailed as a linguistic genius, was busy developing what she called culinary diplomacy protocols. I'm pretty sure her next project involved negotiating with a race of methane-breathing crystals using a souffle recipe. The Krel'nax Diplomatic Corps sent an official communication, which was less a letter and more a mathematically perfect sculpture that somehow conveyed gratitude, confusion, and an invitation to share more baking recipes. They want the full chocolate chip cookie recipe, Dave reported. Apparently, they've determined it's not just a diplomatic document, but potentially the most sophisticated communication protocol in the known galaxy. My cargo ship, the SS Persistent Mistake, was now officially designated as a diplomatic vessel, which was hilarious considering I was still basically a delivery driver who had accidentally started and stopped an interstellar war. Recommendation, Dave said, continue existing. I laughed. Thanks for the stellar advice. The universe, it turned out, had a sense of humor, and sometimes that humor involved pop music, baked goods, and the most unexpected diplomatic negotiations in galactic history. Just another day in interstellar logistics.